Welcome to Let's Talk Licensing, the Lunch and Learn edition, broadcasting live and loud. Happy New Year. This is the intersection between
Welcome
intellectual
to
property,
Let's.
content licensing, and Web3. Now, I'm Shad Eleazer, and this session is intended for my employees, my men and women who are working 9 to 5 and building their personal brand. And so, what I want you to understand is that uh, intellectual property is the number one way that you are exploited in an employer slash employee arrangement. And in this session, I'm going to cover how that happens and also some strategies that you can use to level the playing field a bit for your work, your creations, your overall career. Thank you to those of you who are tuning in across
Talk
multiple
License.
social media networks, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc., YouTube. And so we oftentimes, when it comes to jobs, we love to bash jobs, especially those of us who may be self-employed. That we all go through a phase where we talk bad about jobs, and there's this: why would you even consider working 9 to 5? And I'm here to tell you that the intrapreneur, who is the person who helps to scale or grow an existing idea, is the most important asset to the growth of an entrepreneur. So, in an entrepreneur's trajectory, they will try, they're going to do it themselves, they're going to operate outside of the laws of business, which law number one is that success in business is not a solo sport. And ultimately, they're going to come into contact with an intrapreneur. This is someone who can look at, let's say, groceries and turn it into a meal, or look at a foundation and turn it into a building. And so people have their different gifts. And for some people, when it comes to taking something that has potential and bringing it to life, that's their talent. But if you put them into a position where they have to start it and bring the team members around, they may struggle in that area. So there's room at the table for different roles and responsibilities. And what we need to do when we talk about, let's say, being a job creator, self employed, or entrepreneur, is appreciate the people who help us run those organizations. So this session is focused on the entrepreneur, the employee who is building their career now. Who this is not for is the person who just comes to work, punches the clock, and leaves at exactly 4:59. This is not for the person who says, "This is not my job, it's not in my description." This session is for the thought leaders, the public speakers, the bloggers, authors, podcasters who are bringing value to your company. Meaning, when you're hired by that company, it's actual news. It feels more like the company acquired your services versus you being hired. So, this is who this session is for. And so, when we talk about common definitions and what every employee needs to know about intellectual property, it's important to define what intellectual property is in an employee context. So, to start things off, intellectual property in this case would be the knowledge that got you hired to begin with. Intellectual property as a whole is describing what we call creations of the mind. That could be symbols, it can be names, it can be images, it can be signature content, it can be inventions. And so all of these fall under examples of intellectual property. So if you were hired to, let's say, provide business coaching, for example, then, or to be a business analyst, your unique method for solving business challenges, you may have created a shortcut along the way, of course, a way to make things easier and more efficient. That would be your intellectual property. So think about your superpower and why you were hired, the works that you've created while you're at a company. And that's what we're describing now. And so now that we understand what intellectual property is, let's define what employment is. And so my definition of employment, so that we have a common understanding, is that employment is an exclusive rights agreement where you provide 100% of your intellectual property in a non-compete arrangement in exchange for security in the form of benefits and recurring salary. And so when we think about W-2 employment versus 1099 employment, all it is, they're both requiring tax forms. So I always look at employees as entrepreneurs or employees as self-employed professionals, because you can't get around the tax form. And so an employee is someone who relinquishes the exclusivity, or let's say who enters into an exclusive arrangement with a company and chooses to go in a non-compete agreement, meaning you can't work for company A and then work with them for a year and then head over to their competitor, which we'll call company B and C, and do the same type of work for those companies. Any smart company that has built their intellectual property and their trade secrets to get to a certain point, the first thing you have to understand is that law number one of intellectual property is to protect it at all costs. And so the number one way to, let's say, lose that market share is to have people who have helped you build something go across the street to your competitor and help build with the secrets that they've developed in working with you. So naturally, they're going to protect that. And the way they protect that is through non-compete agreements and arrangements. So again, self-employed, and says, okay, I'm going to enter into this arrangement because I'm going to relinquish these rights that I have, intellectual property, exclusivity, meaning I can sell my services to the highest bidder in exchange for the security that a position may offer in the form of lower costs and benefits and or recurring salary. So that's what employment is. And so it's important to understand when it comes to intellectual property versus what most people do. They either build businesses or get jobs based on their skills, but the company is thinking about the arrangement in terms of intellectual property. And the reason why I say this is because the deliverables, the projects, the services that you provide, when they're handed over, you don't get those back when you leave the company. The deliverables that you submit in the carrying out of your work doesn't transfer with you when you leave. Even worse, in this arrangement, because before this video you were unaware that this dynamic existed, you didn't negotiate with the parent company to have your intellectual property transferred. It is nowhere within your hiring agreement. The word is never mentioned in any way, shape, or form in your onboarding. And so these are all aspects to think about. So the worst part of this is the non-compete. So you can't even give your knowledge to a similar company for, in some cases, 6 months or up to 2 years. And so that's what we have to start to think about and consider. And so the problem that I see is, in most cases, uh, you're a personal brand, meaning you've established reputational currency, you've established reputational equity within your market and industry, you've established reputational credit score, and you're working with a company, and the relationship with the company is not a collaboration in any way, shape, or form. And so, for many speakers, that many authors, many publishers, many technical leads, many experts who have tenure within their industry, what tends to happen is scenarios such as this. The head of marketing may come to the professional and say, I want you to use our corporate slides and branding when you speak at the upcoming code camp. Great. Okay, I'm going to use the slides. Now, on the back end, the professional, the personal brand, can't expense the travel, gas, hotel, meals to the company, and they won't cover expenses because they haven't determined an ROI, return on investment, for that speaking engagement. So your speaking engagements, we can't draw a tangible line from this activity to revenue generated for the company or the business. And so this personal brand, this professional, this leader is speaking around the country on their own dime. Now, many of us have done this. I've done it. Many of the people viewing this have done it. But when we talk about, I'm taking my intellectual property, meaning I created this presentation. This is a signature presentation, and I'm aligning it with the corporate branding so that there's visibility, there's impressions. Every time I change from slide 1, 2 on up to slide 20, they're receiving impressions of the corporate brand. And so you recognize that from let's say a marketing standpoint, but when it comes to an ROI standpoint, somehow that the light bulb doesn't come on and the dots don't connect. And that's something that needs to change within, let's say, professional services consulting industries. And so, my first point of reflection that I'd like to share is that the relationship with your parent companies needs an overhaul. So, oftentimes, the height of your value, the peak of your value, is a reflection of the depth of your relationships. The height of your value is a reflection of the depth of your relationships. Meaning, if you think of yourself highly, you're going to find yourself in deeper, more meaningful relationships. If you think of yourself on a lower tier, I'm not worth it, my talent is not on a world class level, you find yourself in transitional, insecure professional relationships. And the news flash here is that many of you are in an abusive relationship, an exploitative relationship with your employers. And so here's few tips that I like to share with you in order to help you to navigate these shark infested waters. Because in most cases, and companies don't always let's say, have bad intentions, but it's up to you as a person who's in this arrangement to always bring to the table what your terms, conditions, and rights are in this case. And so the first thing I would suggest is to build your brand. And what I mean by build your brand is I want you to make a decision that you are a specialist, you're an expert, you are world class in a specific area. If that's JavaScript, that's fine. If it's diversity and inclusion, that's great. If it's healthcare IT, wonderful. No matter what your calling is, decide that you are a specialist at it, be as specific as possible, and then go on the path to become world class at it. And so, how you become world class at it is number one, you share your viewpoint on, so you put the cherry on top. So if the news story of the day is the crypto markets are down, if you want to be established as a blockchain expert and world class at blockchain, then you put your cherry on top of that news. You give your viewpoint on what's going on in the world today from your side of things, and make up your mind to be the best at that. And so next is protect your work. So if you're creating ebooks, if you're creating, let's say, podcasts, if you're writing books and you're publishing them on a number of self-publishing platforms, or if you've put together enough reputational currency to land a book deal, then I want you to think seriously about what you're creating and how you can protect it. As I mentioned, the number one law of intellectual property is to protect it at all times. And so at a think about copywriting your work, think about trademarking your intellectual property, and also to use domain protection as well, and reserve domains for your signature ideas, works, and collaboration. So, but trademarks would be the peak of protection, copyrights as well, and also look at registering domains for your work. At a minimum, your first name and last name should be registered, and you should own your first name and last name in terms of domain registration. Next is, as you built your brand, you've established your reputational currency within your industry, within your region, and just geographic footprint. Just think about the map and you have a presence there. I want you to ask for partnerships, sponsorships from your company. I want you to lay it out this way. Pay attention. This is good and based on the true story. I want you to state the use case. I am speaking at XYZ Code Camp. And at XYZ Code Camp, there's going to be 500 people within our target audience, our prospective clients. There's going to be 25% of decision makers who are in the audience. The expenses are going to be $750 for hotel, for meals, and 2 nights of rental car. And so I would like for you to sponsor this event. And here's why. I'm going to provide you a written report of, let's say, who signed up. I'm going to provide an attendee list. And that's how you start to present the activities that you're doing and align them to the line of business that it is relevant for. So if you speaking at this event could potentially result in someone joining the company, then you need to talk to the recruiting staff. If you work for, let's say, a software vendor, and your presentation could result in software licenses being sold, then you need to talk with sales. And so you align what the purpose of your presentation is with the business unit that would benefit the most. And you ask them for buy-in, for sponsorship. And using this approach, I've had several companies when I was an employee sponsor my events, sponsor my conferences, and ultimately we developed a relationship where I had a corporate card because I was doing so much speaking and fully invested in building communities as an employee. And that's what made the amplification of my work a lot easier because I had a company who fully bought into my vision, but they can't buy into something that I did not present. And so I had to present it. And it's not easy to step into an office and present this because let me tell you, um, in the earlier days of all this personal branding stuff, you would be seen as distracted or you're not focused on, the mission, and you're doing things that are not considered billable work. And so these are all challenges that you're going to run into. And so things have changed, and more employment decisions are made through personal brands and social media and those relationships. And so you're the person who is going to hire you for your next position. Chances are they may have read your blog or browsed your YouTube channel. They may be a subscriber at some point, and they may have sat in the audience of one of your presentations. And that's something you have to keep in mind, but it also has underlying value to your industry and to your company. They know this on some level, but sometimes they're slow to assign a monetary value, and that's where you're going to help them. And so, next, I would suggest that you um, build your stage. Build your stage. And so I'm going to give you a quick analogy here. The analogy is Saturday Night Live. And so Saturday Night Live is a place where people who are the next level of talent can showcase their abilities and ultimately land movie deals, comedy tours, so on and so forth. We've seen it time and time again, from the Chris Rocks to the Chris Farleys to David Spades to Eddie Murphy, uh, on down the line. And so it exists to provide the next generation with an outlet. And so within your community, whether local or online, there's a next generation for your industry. And so you can build your brand, build your awareness, your reputation as an expert by providing people that stage. Meetup.com is excellent for this sort of opportunity. Discord groups are also very popular. Telegram groups are also excellent for this. And so in my personal journey, for oh my goodness, the last 15 years, I've done exactly that. And many of the opportunities that come to me are from those relationships. So every single month, I host up to 3 to 4 meetings for different industries and give opportunities to people to become first time speakers or for experts to come and share their thoughts with the communities that I've developed. And so you can and should do the same. Meetup.com is a beautiful thing because it's a real time. It's the most powerful local search engine for interest based groups or special interest groups. So if you wanted to know who is the blockchain expert in New York City, chances are you can go to meetup.com and do a search and find communities to tap into. Now, what happens if you're the organizer of those communities? Then you become a lightning rod for opportunity. And that's what you should do. And so finally, I want you to set terms and conditions during the hiring process. And so, since you've protected your work, you need to mention uh, in the hiring process how intellectual property is going to work. It may have you labeled as a bit difficult, or wow, this person has a lot of uh, red tape surrounding them. But when you bring the ideas to the table, chances are you won't be run over and taken advantage of. And that's what the purpose of this session is. And so, intellectual property is one of the most powerful ways to build generational wealth. And as employees, every single employee who is listening to the sound of my voice can and has intellectual property at their disposal. Companies would not function without your input and intellectual property that is donated to the company's growth and success. And so now that you're aware of this dynamic, you need to change your rules of engagement so that you protect yourself, you build your brand, and when you change companies, you're able to keep your reputation intact and use those lessons and experiences in order to grow your own personal branding empire. I'm Shadidi Laser on behalf of Let's Talk Licensing. This is the intersection between intellectual property content licensing and Web3. Leave a comment on your key takeaway from this session, and let's start a dialogue within the comments. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.